Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another chill film discussion. Name is TBD. I don't know if we're going to change it or not at some point, but for now, it's called Chill Film Discussion, episode 8. For some reason, I have it episode 7, I believe, but today's episode 8. But today's film we are reviewing or discussing is called The Lobster. It is released in 2015, and it is directed and co-written and co-produced by Yorgos Lanthimos, and it stars Colin Farrell and Rachel Weisz as the two main characters, both David and the short-sighted woman / narrator of the film. It is a surreal black comedy dystopian, and yeah, we're gonna get right into it because I think there's a lot to say about this film, to be honest. I'm still trying to figure out how I feel about it, just to be honest. So this discussion is actually going to be really, really helpful. Austin, Peter. Oh yeah, well, I forgot to mention our special guest today. Our special guest today is Peter. He's another friend of mine. And so yeah, we've been doing this special guest thing for the last now 3 weeks. So welcome to the stream, Peter. But yeah.
Glad to be here, long time watcher, first time guest.
No, our pleasure. It's always nice to have another person to discuss.
Yeah, definitely.
It adds a dynamic. So, which is cool. Austin, Peter, what are your general thoughts on the movie? Did you like it? Did you not like it?
That was a interesting movie. I don't know where to begin with this type of stuff, so I kind of don't want to go first, but I thought it was I don't know, it was enjoyable at times. It felt like it dragged on at other times, but I think the overall concept was pretty good. It was surprisingly there was a mix of a lot of different things, right? There's the black comedy bit. There's there were a couple of horror type bits, which were Wait, this is spoiler full discussion, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
This discussion is spoilers. If you have not seen The Lobster, disclaimer, and you care about spoilers, do not watch the rest of this stream because we are going to discuss the plot.
The ending was very I like the ending, but it was I was prepared to turn it off at the in case it because they showed
that was
further context. They show some other gory stuff in the beginning of the film. They hold the guy's hand inside a toaster and turn it on, and they don't show the actual killing of the dog, but they show a dead dog that's been kicked to death.
Right.
Yeah. So I was like, oh god, they're gonna show this part.
There are definitely some gory parts. Totally agree with you at the very end. I had to skip parts of it. I just didn't want to see whether or not he was actually going to mutilate his eyes with a steak knife.
Before I begin, for the premise of the movie, there's a premise where basically it's a society where where everyone must be in pairs. It's enforced by the law.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't go to the if you don't live in pairs, then you get sent to this hotel where you try to find love for 45 days, and if you fail, you'll turn to an animal. And love in this universe is defined by a specific characteristic. It's often a flaw of some sort, you're short-sighted, you have a limp, you can't speak clearly, you have lisp. Yeah, but it's not always a flaw. But so the first half of the movie is about this this hotel, and the second half of the movie is after this dude escapes, and he goes to the wilderness and finds this rebel group of singles, which have their own issues. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that just for the viewers who haven't actually fully watched this movie.
But yeah, Austin, how do you feel overall about this movie?
This is definitely an interesting, almost strange movie. Just because of this concept is definitely dystopian, and I think they try to I don't know if it's kind of an allegory or just trying to. It's just definitely trying to talk about concept, right? And the concept is love, companionship, loneliness, and they pretty much focus on that concept, and then they try to I feel like they only focus on that one portion, and then it doesn't. They don't really show how the rest of the world is affected. So sometimes it doesn't really make sense. But they're only trying to pinpoint one aspect of this society. But when you look at the way that the rest of the when they go join the outside world in the city, right? you begin to question, at least I did, right? Like how can society function like that, and how people can work around this kind of system, or like the kind of like the restrictions or regulations that goes along with it. But that really wasn't the focus. The focus was really mainly just the hotel and the system that the hotel kind of instituted or was part of, right? And then on the other side of that, you have the loners out in the forest and the woods, right? And people living like that and just not in pairs, and seeing people who just like trying to live their own, but at the same time there's this kind of this collective where they still are part of this bigger group. But I think this movie was kind of just strange, but it had some interesting things that it was trying to convey, which did leave me thinking. But at the same time, I just think the way that it was being portrayed, just sometimes it didn't sit well with me, or just it was a little weird. And maybe that was the point of the movie, right? Just to give that unsettling feeling. So I had some. I wouldn't say I had like a really really strong feelings. I just I think was just more not perplexed, just trying to figure out what this movie was trying to do, and then go along for the ride with it.
Yeah, it feels like you just kind of have to like digest it for a bit.
Yeah, exactly. You have to digest, and you have to like, even after it was over, it's like, well, like I had to figure out. I think that, as you said, Patrick, like what was this movie trying to tell me? And and like how did I feel about it, right? Because some of it was, I think, controversial. At the same other points were just like, okay, that's a pretty intelligent point to make, and we can go into that later in our discussion, like what they were trying to say. But I was just sometimes after the end, I was just like, it's not like I didn't hate it this movie, but I didn't love it either.
Yeah, so like this movie was when you talk about the world building of this movie, I actually really liked how they did the world building in the very beginning. Like they didn't really give us anything, right? It was the opening scene was literally a woman driving a car and she just shoots a donkey or something, and you're like, all right, what's going on? I mean, I think at first, that was a really good attention grabber for me, at least. It was like,
yeah,
I have no idea what the heck's going on. Like, why is she shooting donkeys? Is she like, so, and then afterward, it cuts to, I think the next scene is where David, the main character, he like gets into a bus and then he goes into the hotel and checks in. And then I think the first thing I realized when there was something up about this world was that like he was like asking, the receptionist was asking about his brother. And then he referred to his brother as the dog, and I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
I was so confused, and then I just love how it was like subtle. It never never had to explain to your face like, "Oh, this is how this world is built." Like it was always through very natural interactions that you got to figure out that how the world building of this story of this movie.
Right.
So that's what I really liked. I actually really liked the beginning of this movie. It was like, I think one of the better ones, considering the concept that they were going for. I think it was one of the like better beginnings of the movies I've recently seen, which is actually like really cool.
I agree. The exposition that they were giving it wasn't like too in your face, and they built it organically, right? They
built it very organically. I agree with that. I actually really like the beginning of this movie, as like introducing the world and the characters. Yeah, I think for me at least overall how I felt about the movie, I overall it's like. I think I felt conflicted as the first word that popped into my mind, because, like you said, Austin, you like what kind of message is it sending? I think that's what I was thinking about for the entire film. I think, in terms of how it was shot and how the story was portrayed, I think that was really well done. But for me, in terms of like drama films, because I consider this film more drama than comedy. Whenever I watch drama films, I always like to personally I like to take something away from it, like that might be useful for life in general. And I feel like for this movie, I didn't really get a sense of like the message it was sending wasn't something that I like
took to heart.
Yeah, I mean, it was more of like a parody on love, like and just relationships in general. I felt like, and in a very dark comical sense, because there's two parts of this film, right? The part where he's in this love hotel thing, where he's trying to find a relationship but couldn't find one, and ends up like meeting and forcing himself to like this like psychotic woman who kills his brother, to this loner woods where like he ends up falling in love, but their society just prohibits love in general. So it's like trying to, I feel like it's trying to tell us that love and relationships work in mysterious ways. You never know like how it's going to end up.
You can't force it.
You can't force it, and it like, you know, but sometimes like it might feel natural, but then there's like societies in the way or whatever. So it's like interesting to say like you know, what can you get out of this in terms of like, oh, you know, relationships are just weird and effed up, and like, you know, you never know what it's going to provide in the future or how it's going to happen. But so like that's an interesting like at least pairing of sorts from like the first act to the second act, because I would say like this film is kind of like two main acts, like because there's two main settings. Maybe if you include the city as the third one, but like yeah, the difference between the two acts and the settings versus how it handles relationships and how the story unfolds regarding David's relationships is interesting, and it's kind of like, I think it's a little bit of like a narrative to modern societies, modern days, like relationships in general. Like you can't like force it, but like sometimes it happens naturally, but then society gets in the way, you know. That's my interpretation of it, at least. Regarding, I guess we'll talk about a bit about David in general and how his progression to the story and the relationships and well on. So how did you guys feel about David and his relationships as the story unfolds? And would you say that like his story makes sense in terms of like starting in this love hotel to like becoming a loner in the woods? What are your opinions about that?
Yeah, I think it does kind of. I mean, the story is told pretty linearly, right? And I think we get to see the natural progression. But at the same time, I feel like, you know, when we first meet David, right, he's kind of out of it, right? He's kind of just, or not out of it, he just doesn't seem like he's himself, right? He kind of is like placed into the society, and he kind of accepts this defeat, and he's like, okay, I have to go to the hotel. He just, you know, lost his wife to someone else, and he's just trying to go into, you know, this world, and just, you know, just to be part of the system because he has to, right? And I think, you know, he kind of seems ambivalent at first, right? We see him set up when he starts his registration. Oh, I am, heterosexual. No, I want to be registered as such. And it's part of the system. He knows it, and he's just going through it, right? And he's just, living it as it is. Right? There's no complaints from him. There's no there's no resistance, right? It's just acceptance of the way that things are. And that's how he's going through it. But I think we kind of see him later kind of break down. But it was also kind of interesting to see this turn, because he kind of gets more desperate, right? After, everyone starts getting paired off, and after, everyone, his time starts ticking down. He can't, find somebody. He can't, capture loners himself and extend his stay in the hotel. I mean, this is, this desperation kind of leads to him finding, getting together with this psychopath, right? Or this heartless woman, and he starts doing things so he can conform to her ideas and how she likes, and a relationship that is built on a lie, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I think it would have been interesting to see at first, like to see him, at least be resistant, but like it's kind of like a turn where he gets this desperation, but it never feels like he was desperate until he starts to. It's his personality that changes, but nothing externally that is shown, right? It's more like, oh, we see his actions change, but never we don't really see this panic on him. It's just like, oh, we see the panic from the woman who was trying to, get his love. The other woman who eventually, commits suicide, right? Because she can't find anyone. Mm-hmm. We see her show panic and desperation, right? But I don't think we really see him show any outward appearance of panic, right? But we see it within his actions, and that kind of like, it was a little, I guess, strange, because we don't really see that emotion from him.
Yeah, there's.
I think that was like a.
I was going to continue on, and because of that, right? We see him go, with the psychopath, and then we see obviously the real emotion that he's shown, right, is when his brother dies, right? Is when the dog gets kicked. That's when I think it clicks in him. We actually see outward emotion, and we see him trying to keep it contained, and then we see him lash out back at and trying to escape after the psychopath tries to turn him in, and then this kind of evolves into him going into the woods, right? And then finding finding a society that he thought he would be more accepted in, right? He's has more freedom, isn't being pushed to make it to a relationship, and he can do whatever he wants or whenever he wants, right? And this kind of turns into finding someone he loves, but now that society kind of says no, there's no love at all, and it kind of turns. And I think that progression of trying to find that relationship also makes sense, right? Because now he's able to do anything he wants to do. He's not he has liberation, right? But now that he wants to do something, that is restricted as well. And I thought that was also a nice contrast from the beginning of the movie. And I thought it kind of built up, and then until the end. We kind of question whether or not how dedicated he is after a new kind of wrench is thrown into the relationship with him and the woman that he fell in love with. So I think there was a natural progression. But for me, it was just the change from when he starts to be in the hotel to his end in the hotel, which is kind of unsettling. But yeah, I think I like the way that his arc went through the movie and how his relationships kind of were formed and broke apart. I think it was shown. I like how it was portrayed and shown.
Yeah. Another trajectory thing to add on that is like what's it? Like halfway through, like he discovered, or not halfway through the first act, he discovers like, oh, you can actually lie about certain things to fall in love. That's what the whole character of the man with the nosebleed, who actually is the man with the limp, is, and you just kind of, I don't know. It feels like kind of natural that he discovers like, oh, you can lie about it, and then he like tries it later, and then it doesn't work, but then at the end he's still like quibbling over like, maybe I could do it again. Felt very real.
Right.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, like I think this lie stuff is interesting. I think it's another thing about like when they were there was a scene when they were talking about when the nosebleed man comes in to the room for David, and there are 3 options. He says which of the 3 is the worst. It's like getting eaten, turn into an animal getting eaten by a bigger animal, or like dying alone in the woods, or like getting a nosebleed occasionally. And so like, I mean, at least for those three options, one of them is like just like lying about the relationship and to see if it like works out, and so that way you don't have to like, it's like, live a better life in the future supposedly. But it's whether or not like I think this film kind of explores whether or not like telling a lie to get into a relationship is like worth it, like whether or not it's like, authentic and genuine, because like in the end, we don't really know exactly what happens to the nosebleed man in his relationship, but you know that because there's a kid in the relationship, that they have like these arguments, right? Because that's how it was presented in the very beginning.
Right. Right.
It was like, oh, the woman was like, oh, we'll put you on a yacht or like whatever, 2 weeks, but like if you guys get into arguments, we'll just introduce a kid. It usually helps. So obviously because they had a kid, they were arguing. They weren't. It wasn't very. It was clear at least from the audience, at least from my perspective, that their relationship wasn't really working, and that the only fundamental thing they had in common was that nosebleed, which he was lying about. So it was like, it's one of those things where it's like, going back to like relationships in general, like how this film explores forced relationships and whether or not they end up, whether or not it's better to necessarily be forced into a relationship or be like not in a relationship in general. But of course the other options are kind of bad too, because you either get transformed or you go into the woods and become a loner. But yeah, I think this film is just like, it's just so puzzling. It's very puzzling in terms of like, what it has to, what it's trying to say, whether or not like it's meant to, I don't know, how you're supposed to interpret it as a person. I think that's like the most puzzling thing. Also, JPEG Slayer has a couple questions for us in chat. I'm going to read them out for us. It's two questions related to this. One, to what extent do people think this kind of line is acceptable in real life? Oh my goodness. Well, we're getting real. Okay. And number two, have you ever personally changed a trait, no matter how small, to attract someone else? Okay. I don't know whether you guys want to answer this, but to what extent do you think this kind of line is acceptable in real life? I'm assuming you mean like toward like relationships, right? And not like in yeah. I guess it doesn't have to be like romantic relationships. It could be like friends or whatever, or family. I think if the premise of your relationship is built on this lie, I don't think that is acceptable, quote unquote, because like.
How do you know what the premise of your relationship's built on?
Okay, well let's say the premise of your relationship. Let's say you meet someone, and they're like pretending to do something, right? They're like let's say like you really like the person you meet really likes reading, and then you go to them and you don't really like reading, but you go to them with like a book and you pretend that you really know about this book, one book that you read in like the last like 10 years because you're not really into reading, and then somehow you connect over reading. Sooner or later, like, I mean, at some point, maybe they might figure out the person that you meet might be like, wait, you've like, I don't know, something comes up and you're like, they find out that you're not a reader. Like, with that relationship, because that relationship is built on a lie, right? Fundamentally,
Right, shared interest that's not really shared.
Right, exactly. So it's like, at some point, it's going to be like, well, either someone's going to find out, the person's going to find out, or like, I guess it will be hidden for the rest, and like you will build more upon it, such that like the lie is covered. But like, to me at least, that it feels very shady, because like if the relationship is built on this like lie that you, then like it's a very shaky foundation.
What if it was like just the way you started it, but like the relationship developed to something else was the shared?
Right. So like, yeah, I mean that is like, you know, progression of like, yeah, as you get into this like get further into this relationship, you build more and more on it, right? And so maybe like other things.
There's something else that covers it.
Covers it, right? Exactly. It makes it, I don't know, worthwhile in me or more acceptable, but it still feels, at least, wouldn't feel necessarily like. Yeah, I guess it just doesn't.
I think
maybe
it
feel
goes deeper
right in the beginning, but yeah, it depends. I guess it depends on the person if they're whether or not they're forgiving or not. I don't know. I myself would feel uncomfortable lying to someone in the very beginning about.
Well, I think it's more like you have someone you like, and maybe you become selective with the information you tell, right? And then you see whether or not you can build upon it. You become more comfortable to reveal more information. But I believe, like, you know, with interest, right? You can, you know, either, you know, maybe start with interest, and it's probably not, you know, the right thing to do. But as you said, Peter, like maybe there are other things that can cover it, right? If once you grow that one interest, maybe you find something else that you're interested. But I also think, you know, maybe it goes deeper than just shared interests. It's more of like core beliefs, right? Because we show that, at least in this movie, right, it portrayed that, you know, the nosebleed girl really had a, you know, kind of was very self-conscious about having a nosebleed, or really cared about, right? I think it's more like a core belief. So something in real life will be like your political belief, your religious belief, and maybe some kind of like moral value you have, right? And if someone else kind of, you know, saddled up to you and just said, oh yeah, I also think this, I also believe in this, right? Or this is wrong, or this is right, right? And then you build off a relationship with that, but then you kind of find out, hey, this person is not, you know, doesn't have the same, you know, religious, political, moral belief as you. Then maybe there's kind of a breakdown there, and I don't think, you know, that is correct, right? Because there's some beliefs where it's like it's really personal to somebody, and it really kind of defines, you know, who they are and what they stand for. At that point, right, once you lie about those things, I think it kind of, you know, that is where there's a relationship in a lie, and where a relationship can no longer exist. And I think that's what this movie was trying to portray without being too political, right? It was trying to say, oh, there's things that, you know, that are kind of, you know, really important to a person, and when you kind of build up a relationship with that kind of lie, then that might not work. That's also could be maybe portrayed to interest as well, right? Someone who really likes something, and you have someone who really doesn't like it, but then they lie about it. Maybe that can also break apart and not have that relationship start out, and that there could be trouble from that part. So I think it's what is that core identity of a person, and then how do you go about it? If it's something like that's kind of like maybe like a white lie, maybe you can turn it something else, or maybe you can joke about it, just say, oh yeah, no, I never really liked it before. But there's some things that kind of I think are kind of existential to each person, and to their identity, and it's whether or not you can accept the identity and be accepting of who they are, right? It could kind of go down to what they right in the beginning of the movie, right? They said that, oh, are you heterosexual or homosexual, right? And then is there an option for bisexual, right? But no, they said, oh, that's no longer an option, right? Because people felt like there was something like a glitch in the program, and
difficulties, as they pointed out.
Exactly. So that kind of goes with the whole building a relationship of a lie, right?
Mm-hmm.
So some people might consider like, oh, you like both men and women, and but they want it to be either or, right? They can't be both, right? There's no chance, right? But in their society, in their world, right? It's kind of like building a relationship of a lie, but when in reality, right? There's it's another part of their personality, another part of a person's core being, and they just kind of ignore that, right? And so that there's another portion of that, and then they try to bucketize you into one or the other, and there's no chance of projection there. So I think it's kind of interesting that that question is like, okay, yeah, like to what extent would you lie, and then what is acceptable? It all depends, I think, on what you're talking about and what you're trying to lie about, right? So it's either maybe like the interest or something else on the surface level, trying to get to know somebody, trying to get them better, maybe in business, or a new friendship that you just never, a stranger you never really talked to, you try to get common ground, right? Just to see if you can connect with them. But as you build that relationship, things will have to make way if you want to progress that relationship into a deeper level, I would say.
It's interesting that your takeaway from the film is that like the basically it's about like important things, important characteristics between in a relationship, like the nosebleed girl, she was self-conscious about it. It was like important to her. I actually had the opposite takeaway, because I thought it was more about the banality of it all. For example, David, the main character, his thing is about wearing glasses, but at some point he's like he waffles between like he wears glasses and he's short-sighted. It's like if you wear contact lenses, that's also short-sighted. So it's like it's not just such a strict category. And later his love interest, I don't really know how to refer to her, but
short-sighted woman / narrator.
Short-sighted woman / narrator. There we go. She is blinded, and then they start talking about what other things they have in common, trying to find the other common ground. So they're like, do you speak German? No.
They don't have anything else in common.
Right. But it was just like, it wasn't like something that had to be important to them, right? It was just something that like they shared.
Yeah.
But isn't that okay? So there's another thing I was going to talk about their relationship, is that like when she becomes blind and they no longer have anything in common, like, and he's struggling to figure out like what else they have in common. Doesn't that sort of like pinpoint how weak their relationship was in general? Like sure, they kind of like fell in love and whatnot, but like to me at least, it was I feel like the relationship wasn't necessarily built on like something that was like really fundamentally strong to begin with. And I know like in the end, David goes into the bathroom and tries to bind himself with the steak knife to like share commonality again. But like the fact that he is willing to do that in like sort of like solidarity with the woman is sort of like, to me, he's struggling to like get back into this relationship, to get into a core mutual like similarity, right? That was the short-sightedness. So to me at least, I felt like the relationship, even though it felt natural to begin with when they were like when they saw each other and they met and they fell in love. At least this love relationship to me is on shaky grounds, because the only commonality between that they have is this short-sightedness, which she loses because she becomes blind, and now he's struggling to it could be seen as an act of love, because he's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna blind myself because like I'm gonna be in solidarity with her. But like the thing is that like, to me, at least like my interpretation of it was that was like there's nothing else. They can build off something else. They don't have to build off this like vision concept. This they don't have to force a similarity between the two to have a genuinely happier relationship. But for whatever reason, he's going back into that like, oh, we need to have something similar again to like do so. You know, like I just felt it was kind of dumb. Not dumb, but like it was just silly that he was thinking about like blinding himself just to like feel like he needed to have something in common with her. I just felt that was unnecessary. Like I can understand from the perspective of like being supportive. Like I can see it being interpreted in two different ways, right? Like the one where it's like, how I interpret it is like, oh, I think it's shaky. Like I don't think this relationship is built on a very solid foundation, because it's like built on this one similarity, versus like, oh, he's just doing it because he's supporting her. Like he wants to experience what she's experiencing, so he's just going to blind himself so they can like be in this together, sort of thing. But I think it just feels very like I said, this is like a part of the conflict that I feel about this film, is that like it's interesting like how I'm not entirely sure how to interpret it in that regard, and also it's unclear whether or not he actually goes through with it. I think that's also left up to the interpretation at the very end, because it cuts to just her sitting alone by herself, and it was a long shot, so it felt like it was like an uncomfortable loneliness, right? That's what it felt like to me. So it's unclear whether or not he actually went through with it and whether or not he did it, because if he didn't do it, then I would say he didn't do it, because that's why the film ended with this loneliness, because she is alone. She doesn't have this similarity with David, because David isn't willing to sacrifice his vision to share this similarity with her or whatever. And so like this, it's just very interesting how like this, like to what extent like do you force, in your perspective, do you force this relationship to be a certain way? And I think that's what like David is trying to do in his sense, even though it's like kind of like romantic in a way. You could interpret it as romantic because he's like sacrificing his vision for the relationship. I think both interpretations are actually supposed to be like there, right? You're supposed to kind of feel how tragic it is, because he loves her enough that he's willing to consider something like that, but they can't build a relationship just off of love. They need some sort of similarity in common. Like I don't think it's like it's a dumb similarity thing. I think like in general the world building is that like you need to have some sort of similarity. It's like a parody of like modern society, but you have to have some sort of similarity, which is why they were like looking for one. Because like, all the similarities they mention, all like with all the partners, none of them are like that deep, right? It's also like we study the same subject in school, which whatever. Yeah, but I think that was going back to like what Austin had mentioned before. I think it was just more of like they were using these concrete examples as just purely examples, right? Like you could see it as like I mean they were pretty much like nosebleeds and everything, but like you could see it as like maybe more of like, oh, what if it was like religious beliefs or like political beliefs or like family values or like culture or something like that. Like that, I think it's just like, and it's just telling us in a certain way that this is like, you can extend it in your own interpretation. Sure. But what I'm trying to say is like I don't think it has to be extended that way too, because like for example, you could take it more literally. Studying the same subject, like a lot of people actually meet their relationship partners because they studied the same subject in school, or they grew up with them, or they're a friend of a friend. Which these are not actually really strong like connections, right? It's just like chance, just like what the relationship happens to be predicated on. Yeah. No, that's definitely true, and I think you're right. Like there's like some moments, but you have to see like. Again, the banal moments, the smaller things, right? Like, so sometimes, smaller things can, either go in one way where you can enamor someone's like, oh, yeah, this, I love the way that they do this. I love the way, they call me this, or how they do something, right? Or it's just these small things. But then,
other ways. It can also be like a way that, you know, turn a relationship, like, oh, they don't do this anymore, they don't love me anymore, they don't, you know, I don't, you know, they used to do this, right, and now they don't. So yeah, I think you're right. It can be interpreted that way as well. Like, you have some of these small things that kind of, you know, attracted you to them, but now that they kind of let that go, it's like, oh well, like, is this the same person that I had, fell in love with? This is the same person that we met, you know, I initially met and thought was, you know, so great, and, you know, no longer, it's now that's no longer there, or it's not really true. Is this something, you know, this is the same person that, you know, I kind of, you know, got interested. Like, if someone just took a class, you know, like, yeah, if they took a class and like, oh, you know, we have the same interest, but you just realize that, oh, they took a class just so they can meet somebody. It's like, well, do you still have the same interest, and is it still there? We don't know, right? And, you know, can they build up off, or can they kind of, you know, gloss over that fact? So,
right. And then I guess there was another question that JPEG Slayer asked. He asked, have you ever personally changed a trait, no matter how small, to attract someone else?
Personally changed a trait.
I feel like everyone has to some extent, but like but not like in the major sense where like. I mean, I don't think everyone has like changed, like lied about, oh, I'm interested in this versus this, but I feel like we all try to put our best selves in front of someone we like, right?
Yeah.
That involves some sort of like subtle, like, you know, it's not like a selective telling of the truth, right?
Yeah.
Right. I think it also depends on how you interpret change, like whether or not like you actually fundamentally change yourself for someone else, or like do you just pretend, like what you said, like do you pretend to do it in a certain instance just to earn extra brownie points in this moment? Like, for instance, if we go back to the movie, like if we go back to like even the relationships that were built in the Club Hotel, like Nosebleed Guy and even David, like those were both built on lies, right? Because Nosebleed Guy never actually has nosebleed problems. He literally has to like keep on pretending he has nosebleeds
with a knife.
But yeah, the knife. And then with David, he has to pretend that he doesn't, like, he's a psychopath, I guess.
Yeah. You know, it's a really drastic change, and he has to be more cruel, not compassionate, which is, you know, strange to him because he's more on the caring side.
Right, he's more on the caring side, and so like, sure, like you could say that they like changed. Or you can even say that maybe like at some point like they will just adopt this lifestyle, and then that will forcibly change them, right? But like, I think the movie kind of shows. I think the movie is kind of telling the audience, or at least that way that I interpret it, is that like you can't like forcibly change yourself for someone else. Otherwise, like, you know, it won't work out in the end, right? It might work out in the beginning, like with meeting someone and like getting into a relationship, perhaps, but like maintaining it is a different story. And like maybe just like a modern day perspective on like how a relationship could fail, if it's just built on a lie. So, yeah. I hope that answers your questions, JPEG Slayer. Feel free to ask more if you want to know more. But I guess, yeah. Going back to the movie, in terms of how the story was told, were you guys ever confused about anything in the movie? Did you feel like it was, in terms of a story progression, did you feel like it was fluid? Did you feel like it made sense? Did you feel like there was any loopholes? So I also like we talked a lot previously about like the thematic significance of this movie, because of a lot of like, you know, relationships in general, and you know, how David's story progresses through love, or different situations of like love, I guess. But did you guys feel that this story was well told and it was fluid in general?
From a
I was gonna say, I think, you know, from a story perspective, right, I liked it, right. I think it kind of, you know, made sense, and it, as I said before, it evolved in a way that I could follow. I think the world building, though, for me, kind of broke down once they got into this city, right? So I think the world building was great at the beginning, right? Because we were kind of isolated at the hotel, and we didn't have to think about the ramifications of this kind of system once it connected to outside society and how outside society would kind of be affected. But once they started to show, like, oh, when the loners, I think, going back into the city, or we kind of question once we see how the outside world function. At least for me, I began to question, like, how can this society function with when everyone's being forced to be in pairs and relationships, and you have people who are loners, who do their own thing, but then try to rejoin society as kind of like secret agents, or kind of infiltrate a society like this. It was that portion that kind of got me kind of off, just because I wonder, like, I didn't think because the society kind of looked normal, right? Once they rejoined it, or once we saw them go into it, the rest of the city looked normal. There's nothing really changing, and I feel like there should be some kind of fundamental change of how people interact with each other, or how society is viewed if being single was kind of criminalized. So I think the world building kind of broke down for me once we got to see them actually in the real world, because it just looked like the world was the same. There's like nothing changed, and there's just only a few aspects of it. And I thought, I kind of began to wonder, what would people think, what would people change, and how would different people react to being single, or just to be being paired in a couple. Is there kind of fear, or there's like no kind of fear anymore? And we see that one interaction with the police officer questioning that one lady in the mall, but that kind of further brought more questions, like, why was she picked out? Why was she singled out? What about other people? Like, is there like checkpoints, and how are just people selectively changed, and just how is everyone else going to going to be part of the society? It kind of broke it down for me. I think it just it showed a difference between when they were in the hotel, when they were in the woods, and now being part in the open world, society. I just started questioning, like, how this world could have kind of functioned at that point.
Okay, so it brought you out because it made it too real.
Right. Yeah, I think so. It made it too real, and I was just like, okay, now what do we do, and how should society work at that way? And I thought there should be more dysfunction at that point.
I mean,
are you a fan of hard sci-fi over soft sci-fi?
I guess. I mean, I guess I want to have like a world built out, and just to see like like things being defined, and just. But I just think as visual tell, like in this world, right? This world, definitely was dystopian, right? I think they just tried to focus on one concept, but then when we were brought out of it, I kind of wanted to know more about it and whatnot. So yeah, maybe more.
Oh, you wanted to know like how it came to this point?
I don't know if they needed to explain how they came to this point. I just feel like I wanted to see how the rest of society would react, and how would the rest of society be, like showing some portion of this. Once we went to the outside world, showing like more of the society and how that would how they would function, because everyone has to be paired up instead of what we are today currently. So I mean, at some points, I guess I more hard in terms of trying to get that definition, but it all depends on the concepts. And I think if they just showed, right, I think for me, like just the hotel, just the loners in the woods, and maybe even just be more selective in what they were telling, and like when they go to like the parents' house, I think then it wouldn't even have clicked to me to think about how the rest of the world worked, right? It's just like when they showed the ball. I just started to wonder, how could the rest of society function like this? So.
Yeah, I'm along the same train of thought there. It feels like they introduced a really interesting concept, and it works in like isolation. But like once you start like tying it to like more realer things, it just feels underutilized.
Right.
Maybe they had more time to the city and show.
I can see your guys' point. I don't know if I necessarily agree, because I feel like the hotel is an extension of the city. Like, the hotel is there because of the city policies, right? Like, if the city finds out that you're not single, they're going to be like, you got to go to this hotel, you have 45 days, find someone else, otherwise you turn into an animal. That's like part of the law, right? So like, the hotel itself as an isolated part, like you saw that in the very beginning, right? But like when he got moved from his house to the bus, on the bus into the hotel. But it I guess, like, to me they're kind of like, they just represent society, like the norm in general, and then you have the woods, which is like the outcasts. And both are flawed in their own different ways, but I don't necessarily didn't mind seeing the city, because it was like you got to sort of see like how, like you got a glimpse of how you got a glimpse of like what society was like for most people, and how they would be transferred into like to the hotel. Like that sort of, like, you got a glimpse of like the police officers sort of going around looking for certificates, seeing if you're still, you're together, you're married, and if not, they would just like apprehend you and put you on a bus. So like, at least to me, it didn't really break the world. In fact, it kind of like built a little bit more, and it made me more intrigued about it. But I guess it never really broke the flow for me in terms of like how the story was told. Because the city was presented as like the next option after the woods, right? Like, he starts in society, he goes into the hotel, doesn't work out, he becomes an outcast, and now he's like wanting to go back into the city for like stability's sake, or like, I guess, relationship stability, since he can't like can't really pursue that as an outcast or a loner. Yeah.
There was the story progression part, but one thing someone briefly touched on this, and they just covered the story progression. But one thing I really had a love-hate relationship was like, basically the entire dialogue in the movie is just so stilted and like dry, right? It's
yes,
just like no emotion whatsoever, and
yep.
It's, I don't know. It just felt like, I guess it's like a parody of like how people interact in relationships and maybe dating apps and stuff, but it's just, it made it felt like I had a hard time like connecting to the characters themselves,
right?
And like figuring out their emotions, right? Like, for example, we had to actually see like David cry over the dog thing, but like most of the time he's just like, he seems emotionless, even though he feels
dry.
Everyone's just dead faced. Everyone speaks in monotone. Everyone just has the same exact expression. Like, there's no. Yeah, I agree with you. There's no. I mean, that's not. I'm pretty sure that's on purpose. Like.
Yeah, that's done intentionally.
They're just hired really bad actors.
Everyone's just like flat. Don't do anything. Director didn't give them direction. Just like no. But I think we all kind of knew that it was intentional, right? But at the same time, it was very hard just because everyone was just like there was like no emotion until we the only one was just seeing the dog die. But everything else was kind of like like everyone just living in a world with and I think that's what it signifies. Everyone's living in a world with no emotion, right? There's no love, there's no passion, so no one can really react, right? And I think that's what it was showing, but it was unsettling, and I think that was the point, right? Because we're in a dystopia, so everything is unsettling, and because of that, everyone else is acting like, well, there's no acting at all, right? There's no way to people to emote, no one really like smiling, and no one really doing anything. So it was definitely I love that you brought that up, Peter, just because it's just I wanted to say like just throughout the film it was just like, oh, this guy doesn't really do anything. Like, I mean, I'm sure I know that Colin Farrell, he's pretty good, but this whole movie is just flat and just I just like what was happening here, and then I kind of feel like, okay, this was intentional, and this is just all because probably symbolism for again, a world without passion or whatnot.
Yeah, without emotion. I mean, like, it's I think it's more of like just a parody on the whole like romantic stuff, like romantic relationships in general, because they introduce these settings, right? Love hotel, find a relationship, but everyone's just like feels like they're dead inside, and they're like,
because they're not able to organically build a relationship. So there's no point to it, right? Then the people are just kind of like, oh, I don't have to be passionate. I have to be forced, otherwise I'm turned into an animal.
Yeah.
And be something that I'm not. So it's definitely.
let's talk about a little bit more about the Love Hotel, because there's a couple points I want to bring up. One, so in the end, David kind of just like pretends to be someone else to attract someone, to attract the psychotic girl, whatever her name is. I don't know what her name is, but it's interesting that he does that, because we see a glimpse of he's given an opportunity from another woman, the butter biscuit woman, to like, she basically throws herself at him. Like, he's like, all right, yo, like, you, me, we can just be together. Like, I don't like, right? It's very obvious that she wants to be with him, or like, he basically just like puts herself out there. But David rejects all of that. He just doesn't even respond to her. And then in the end, he pretends to be someone else and ends up being like attracted. Attracted. Sorry. He ends up being someone else to on paper be a couple. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to get your guys' opinions about that, because to me it's like it's another message. Now at the time, I think my interpretation of it was that like David was trying to, he maybe still had a little bit of time left, so he was trying to find someone he could mesh better with authentically. But once he realized that he didn't have enough time and he was scared of the possibility of turning into an animal, he kind of just like forced himself to like just pretend to be someone else. Like, that's my interpretation of it, but I want to see you guys' interpretation, because I feel like there's another way of seeing it, more like, oh, they were like kind of happening at the same time, and David just like purposely rejected this biscuit woman girl because like she for whatever reason, maybe she was too obvious or whatever. It could be like another like tell onto the modern day society's relationships, right? Like if someone is putting themselves way too out there, is too readable or whatever, you just reject them because you don't feel like you're attracted to someone who just puts too much out there in the very beginning. Yeah, like I said, I want to get your guys' opinions about that, your interpretations about that, because I found that pretty interesting, that he had to pretend himself to be in a relationship with a psychotic woman, where he could have just easily just pretended to be, you know, like this biscuit woman, this biscuit loving woman who I think would have ended up being like his dog wouldn't have died most likely, right? From her.
Right.
So,
I think,
or his brother. So yeah.
I think it's more about attraction, right?
So you're saying that David was attracted to?
No, not to the second. He wasn't attracted to sex. So I think it's about attraction, and then it kind of went from I think it's there's two different concepts here: attraction and desperation, right? So when we see David, we see him kind of attracted to the nosebleed girl, right? He kind of wanted to dance with her and try to be with her, but then she gets taken away. He attracted, and she's young, right? Young, beautiful, right? And then he also maybe he also once she's taken away, he kind of tries to start something with the blonde girl, the best friend, right? But then the blonde girl rejects him because she was in I think it was kind of implied that she was in love with the girl with the nosebleed, right? But so they can be together, right? The other girl, the butter biscuits woman who committed suicide, she's older, right? So he wasn't really attracted. I think there's kind of like a kind of a say like of how people. I think there's kind of like a message there about how attraction works, and how these men kind of go for the young woman compared to the older woman. How it's unfair for the older woman. How she was in a society where she was at disadvantage, right, to find love, and then how these guys he was going for the younger woman. And then once all options of the woman were gone, right? He thought could have been a backup for him, right? He never really cared. But once she was gone, right, all the other women that were presented as options were no longer there, and the only other woman left was the psychotic woman. So he was desperate, and he went towards for her and tried to change himself to be with this woman so he can find he could finally be in a relationship. So I think it was kind of like two things they were going at. One is just like the concept of attraction. Like he wasn't attracted to the older woman, right? He kept playing her. Well, he never really played with her. He just kind of ignored her, and she kept throwing herself. But he just, I think for her, she was just like not really. She wasn't even an option, right? Because she wasn't young and attractive and beautiful like the other two younger women that he was pursuing. This was just an older woman. He just like, I don't really care. But once she's gone, all options are off the table now, and he had to go for the heartless woman.
Okay, so you're saying it's more of like a timing. It was just pure timing. Okay.
Right. Exactly.
So
I don't think it's a coincidence that like the first person you actually see like die is a woman. So which there's a whole like biological aspect of exploration, and she needs to have like, a lot of women need to have a family by like their late 30s, otherwise it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I definitely think it was kind of more of a kind of a message conveyed about like how unfair it is for women who are older, especially in this world, right? And how desperate she was kind of going to be, and how these men they think they have options, but then once all the younger women have been are paired off with someone else, like he's like, oh, I don't have anything else, and I know that the other woman who I could have been with, who obviously was just trying to be in a relationship, like I ignored her, and now I have to, it was my fault, and now I'm going toward a way to a woman who will hurt me and my family, and it wasn't the right thing to do, or not. So he didn't even give the butter biscuit woman the time of day. And
I know, it was just like completely ignored. I felt sad for Butter Biscuit Woman. I felt sad for her. It was just I wanted to bring that up because I just thought it was like, I don't know, it just feels almost unfair to her to just be able to just like someone who is trying so hard but like just doesn't end up getting even the time of day from someone else who, the reciprocation at least, nothing at all. Also, Miriam in the chat says, hi, how are you guys doing? I'm doing well. Welcome back to the chat, Miriam. Today we're talking about The Lobster. A film in 2015, and then of course here's my friend Austin again, and then we have another special guest. His name's Peter. You guys doing well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Awesome.
I wanted to follow up on that thing where like they really highlighted how unfair it was for her because they lingered on her death scene for like 2 minutes or something. Like she's just like on the floor like screaming pain.
I actually thought she had died at first, but then she started like wailing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That was
very uncomfortable, unsettling, which I guess most of the movie unsettling.
Yeah. No, exactly.
Okay. Yeah, once again, this is another aspect of a relationship that's like, it's just, sometimes you may feel, I don't know, I guess maybe from like a personal standpoint, sometimes it feels like, even if you put your like all out there, like you try really hard, it's just like, it doesn't get reciprocated and you get ignored and it feels bad, right? Yeah, not to be pessimistic, but like sometimes even if you put 100% of yourself in there, you can only be at most 50%. It takes two to tango. Anyway, this whole film is about is regarding relationships. Is just a very interesting.
I kind of.
Perspective.
I want to bring up another point though, about this hotel and just the system. What do you guys think about the whole? I guess the concept of being turned into an animal, right? What are your thoughts about that? And I want to discuss more about this kind of because it was a big well, at least in the beginning, right? It was just a big thing, right? It was kind of like a ticking time clock, right? Mm-hmm. So I want to know what you guys think about this whole concept of being turned an animal, what it means, and what you thought about it.
Peter, you want to go first?
All right. I mean, so if you look back onto what I have to look this up, but the reasons he gave for being a lobster, they all like tie back to like his real life. One that was like, for example, that they live underwater, they live forever, they're fertile.
They're fertile for the whole lives.
Yeah, and then like when he was talking about his relationship with the fake when he and short-sighted woman were in the town and they're talking about their fake relationship, right? They're talking about going to the beach and having 4 kids, and it seemed like basically this is kind of what he wanted from real life. But honestly, like outside of like the whole lobster connection to there, I was really confused by like what all the other animals meant, and like it was very forced metaphor in my mind because I couldn't figure out like what was going on, like why they were turning to animals, and like it could have been portrayed some other way that was like more easier to digest, I think. So, but maybe I'm just uneducated.
I mean, the girl with the blonde hair, the really good hair, she turned into a horse, right? Like a pony?
With really good blonde
hair, so she preserved that, which I thought was kind of like an F you to this house. Like, she was like, whatever, I'm going to just accept that this is my last day as a human, but I will retain my one greatest characteristic, even post-human life. So yeah, like in terms of animals, the concept of animal, maybe it has something to do with like I don't know. I haven't really thought about it too much. You bring up a good point, Austin. Though I haven't really thought about it too much, but I think my interpretation now, if I put a little bit of thought into it, is that like as humans, if you can't find love, within the system, then you won't be able to find love at all once you turn into an animal.
Bestiality is always an option. That's my takeaway.
Yeah, right, yeah. So like, I mean, I think biologically animals can love, like dogs love and whatever, and cats. But like, I think maybe the concept is like, yeah, like you can still have like sex and everything, but like you're not gonna be able to find love at all anymore. Like it's like, bam, you're done.
You have a time limit, and
I mean, sure, they could have just like executed them, but like that would have been permanent. But like, maybe it's like a sort of like a, in their twisted sense, a mercy thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I really don't know like why the whole like turn into an animal thing is there, but it's a good question.
I definitely think it's kind of like Kafkaesque, right? Where Kafka's story, the guy turns into a big cockroach, right? So here you have people turning to animals, and I think it kind of there's obviously symbolism there, but to see what it was I was trying to determine what it could be telling us, right? And I think maybe there was just an area where we're trying to see like in this society, and maybe it's commenting on our side, kind of not demonizing, but kind of just like putting a stigmatism on being single, right? Where people always has to find a relationship or be in a relationship, and if you're not, you're kind of outcast. Especially if you get older, right? The time limit comes, and then you have no relationship. You're an animal or beast or whatnot. You can't be you can't be part of our society anymore, right? As you get older, you're expected to have kids, have the family, right? As you're younger, you could kind of get away with that. Not being, but as you're older, when people see you, when you're introduced to people, right, your functions or parties, companies, people, kind of expect you to be in a relationship or to be married with somebody. And sometimes, when you're not, what does that say about you if you're not married and whatnot? You're single, like, you have like the, stereotypes in business where like, oh yeah, if you're not married, what does that, say about your own family life, your own personal responsibility and all that stuff, right? So I think it's kind of, giving that stigmatism like, oh, you're an animal now, you're an outcast, you're kind of, out there, you can't really, be part of society if you're just, a single person. You have to be, attached. Otherwise, you're either a man who maybe there's a deviant or who's crazy and whatnot, or maybe you're a woman who's a crazy cat lady, right? That's the kind of like thing. You have that kind of you have that kind of stigmatism, right? That's what I think that they're trying to say. Kind of what they're trying to comment on, right? And that's why I think kind of symbolizes that kind of perception of society of how being single once you get older, once the time limit's up, what does at that point. I don't know if it should make sense for the younger people to face that, but for the older people, like the heartless woman, the butter biscuit woman, David, they definitely would have been I think more if they were in our society, if they knew more view, people maybe not having a problem, but there would just be people would think and wonder like why are they still single and whatnot, like, what did that effect have in society. So I think that was kind of where and then you also had the guy with John C. Reilly, right, his character with the lisp, he was also desperate and whatnot, how he would be portrayed as he got older, still being single and not being in a relationship. So
right.
Yeah. When the main character turns on him, like trying to get him to like not shoot him, you kind of see like how society portrays like him, right? They're like, oh, you think you're ugly, you have a lisp, you're not going to find anyone, it's time's holding us up. It's just like a sort of harsh reveal.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very harsh. This guy's like, oh, you're better off, or you're going to just be an animal anyway. You're going to be an outcast anyway. What's the point? And
yeah.
J. Bexler asks, what animal would you all choose to turn into if you were in society? Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I guess. I don't know. I didn't think about it. I mean, in terms of experiences, it'd be kind of cool to turn into like some sort of bird so I can fly.
Austin disappeared.
Austin disappeared. Oh no.
I
Yeah, I think a bird of some sort.
but a lot of animals can fly. You know, a fly could fly. It's literally called
I
fly.
don't want to be an insect though. Insects have very short lifespans.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, off the top of my head, I'd just be welcome back, Austin. I'd just be some sort of bird, maybe an eagle or a crow or a raven. Kind of cool. I don't know.
I was gonna say raven. You know, I like them.
They're
They're
very intelligent. Some of those birds are very intelligent.
they play games, which is
They play
nice.
games. Yep. They can do escape rooms.
They're social. Yeah, they can do puzzles.
They can do puzzles.
Yeah.
Wait. So would you also choose the same thing, Peter?
Yeah, but more specifically, like a raven or a corvid of some sort.
Okay. And then you, Austin, what kind of animal would you turn into?
What did you guys say? Birds, ravens?
Yeah.
Eagles, birds, crows.
Are you gonna join us in our little flock?
We can have a little bird threesome. I'm just kidding.
Right. That's I don't know. It's a very hard question. I think
Yeah, JPEG Slayer, these are really hard questions.
I'd probably be like a turtle. I think.
A turtle. All right.
Yeah.
Why turtle?
Or tortoise? Just because, well,
You live like
I think
centuries.
for me, it'd be the longevity aspect appeals to me,
Okay.
and then just be able to relax and just do what I want, get where I want, and just
Live life on your own pace.
yeah, exactly. Live life at my own pace. I don't have to follow anyone else, and I'm just go be on an island, do what I want, eat my the lettuce, even though
You want to go home, you just like
exactly. It's so easy.
I was going to say, are you getting these tortoise impressions of Chill from Finding Nemo from those tortoises because they live really chill lives or something?
Very cool. I'm thinking of a Galapagos tortoise, right? Big tortoise, just going around, just sitting down and just moving when I want to, and
Right.
not a sea turtle, but just an actual tortoise.
Okay. Cool.
on kind of like unrelated note, Austin was talking about stigmatism a lot, and then I thought like astigmatism, and then I thought like, oh, I wonder if lobsters are short-sighted, and then I just realized that the whole thing about his main flaw being short-sighted is probably also like a double pun on, like, he's short-sighted, like in the sense like he doesn't plan ahead that far, because it shows in any other flaw, right? And then the whole like blinding thing too is like you're blind to, you can't see stuff is also a big metaphor.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good point. That's a pretty good point.
That's pretty smart. Yeah.
That's pretty smart. Yeah.
if they actually had that intention, that would have been really.
I think that might have been
intentional, but even
that
that
shows in anything, right?
That's true.
Speaking of funny moments, I think the part where in the movie where the loners intrude at night, they go into the night, and then they're like, three of them go into like the hotel manager's room, and then it's like she's like, oh yeah, held at knife point, and then the husband has to decide whether or not he can live alone, and then the loner leader lady gives him a gun, and I was like, oh my god, this dude's so dumb. Like, why would she give him a loaded gun when he can shoot any one of them? It's obviously not loaded, and then he's like, okay, I'm gonna shoot my wife.
Yeah. No, but
this dude is so okay. Whatever. I don't know. I just thought it was so. I thought that was a really funny moment. I don't know if I don't think it was intentionally supposed to be funny, but I just thought it was hilarious because the premise of it is like, there's no way they were gonna give you a loaded gun when like he can shoot any of them if it was actually loaded, right?
No, that's true. And I also kind of think it kind of broke down the whole aspect of what their love was built around, right? Because he's like, oh, I can live, I can't live without her and whatnot. But it's like, well, you're kind of forced to, right? Because if one of you dies, right, you have to go back into the hotel and find another pair immediately, right? Even if so it's just like this whole system's like there's no one true love that lasts forever, right? Yeah. Or whatnot. It's like, oh, you have to immediately find somebody else. So even though he was telling us, he was trying to, oh yeah, I love her, I'm desperate, do this. I was like, that's not true, because you're running a hotel and like you're once one of you is gone, it's just going to have to be on to the next relationship, no matter what. Even if you love the other one, you're going to have to find another love that you have to connect with at that point.
Right, right.
So
this kind of brings me back to maybe a point that when I don't know about you guys, but when you guys saw that they were infiltrating at night with like a gun and everything, did you think that they were going there to kill them? Because that's my interpretation, right? I thought they were going to go in there to kill them. Like that's what it was insinuated. But it turns out that they were just going there to hijack their relationships, which is like kind of an interesting thing. Because do you think that could be like maybe that's even like in a sense worse than death? Because a lot of times like the punishments in this movie aren't death related, right? Like you turn into an animal, or like in this case, like they're trying to hijack the relationship and make it just sort of like almost tell them that your whole love system doesn't work at all. And so like, do you think that this is like sort of like saying that, oh yeah, instead of like this is like worse than death itself, in that like this punishment that they have to like live with the repercussions, their choices, rather than like just be gone and die, right? I don't know if that's sort of like a sense that you got from this sort of like mission, but that's sort of like an interpretation I found, because a lot of like the consequences of this movie in terms of like life and stuff like that, there's no death. In fact, I think the only death that occurs is the French maid, and the loner, the loner leader. But other than that, and those are from like not part of society, right? Those are like outcasts. But like within this society itself, there's not really like death is replaced by like this animal transformation, or I guess leading to the animal transformation is like loss of relationship, or like a relationship built on flimsiness or whatever.
Who was the French maid?
The French maid was the mole, the one that gave the loner leader the gun.
Oh, okay.
She was French and she was a maid, so I just called her a French maid. She spoke French. I don't know if she meant or not French, but the actress is French. I looked into the
French. Yeah, I didn't know that.
I called her French. Yeah, so the French speaking maid, she ended up dying, right? Because she got stabbed by the newly blind narrator. Yeah. So
in a very humorous way.
In a very humorous way. And then the loner lady kind of like emulates her actions as she falls to the ground, and pretends that she's the one and like speaks. So I thought that was like I thought that was interesting why she did that. But I guess she's trying to pretend, and her like voice is supposed to be, I don't know. I actually don't know exactly why the loner leader pretended to like act the same exact way that the French maid was dying, but
well, she wanted to hide, right? Or it's like hide her presence, hiding, right? So she couldn't be right across from her. She had to be out on the ground.
Right, but eventually she divulged that she was fine because she spoke.
Oh, that's true.
And then the blind narrator was like, "Oh my gosh, let's go." She was a little bit spooked out by that. Yeah.
Did you notice in the movie that all the animals that were going around?
Yes.
That was so funny. I thought, it's just like, oh, there was like a random flamingo, or there's like a camel in the background, and I was just like, whoa, this is.
There were a lot of animals. Yeah. There was like a parrot or some bird at some point.
Yeah.
In the woods. I was like, it's interesting, but we never saw a lobster.
Wait, no, I didn't notice the parrot, but wasn't that what the John C. Reilly?
Yeah.
I say parrot. It was some sort of bird. It could have been it was a colorful, more like colorful looking bird, but I just thought of parrot because of what the character said he wanted to become.
I was impressed by how they actually like just filmed all of this stuff. Because you have to get the camera just like walking this path just exactly while everyone's talking. If they veer off or get distracted, you have to reshoot.
Are you talking about the animals?
Yeah.
I mean, the animals are probably well trained.
Yeah.
I also saw there's a fun fact about this film is, from the Wikipedia page, is that a lot of the lighting was very natural that they used. They did not use any artificial lighting except for filming at night when they had to like in the woods. They did add some lighting, but other than that, it was all very much natural. And I think there was some like analysis I was like looking into where they were like saying how the colors of the film symbolized something.
No emotion.
It was very
just like the
the
acting.
palette of the colors was very like dreary. It's a very dreary palette.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like once
I mean, it
again,
gave that dystopian feel, right?
It-
And then,
yeah.
and it's just like, oh, this is something unsettling or dry, or just something's not right with society, or some society's boring, or
You know what other dystopian film we watched that had sort of like these like kind of like the acting was very just monotone? Ghost in the Shell. You remember that? The palette was also dreary. Maybe it has something to do with the dystopian sort of
the trope, right? If this is the
yeah.
way that it is, so that people can recognize it and say, oh, this is not right, and this is the
Right.
world that's not correct. And,
right.
Ghost in the Shell is about finding love in relationships, right?
Exactly. One to one comparison. Okay, JPEG Slayer says, to me, the 45 days in the hotel is symbolism for how most people want to find a relationship or settle down before 30. Do you guys feel more pressure after watching this movie to do the same, or is it... My goodness, what are these questions?
Can you ban this dude from this server, please, or whatever?
This guy's asking real questions. 45 days is the symbolic
That's a good way.
for settling
like
down
that.
before
I like
30.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely see what he's talking about. I just don't want to
Why
answer.
45 instead of 30? Why not say 30 days? Why does it 45 days?
Who knows? Maybe 45 years, right? You're middle aged, and I don't know,
That's fair.
right? Because that's Butter Biscuit Woman. She was definitely getting older now, right? And,
True.
that's a very good way to symbolize. I mean, yeah, it should have been maybe 30 days, but 45. That's a good way to pair it off. Like, oh, you have the age thing and time, instead of just saying 45 years, you got 45 days to do it. So, I like that viewpoint. It's
it's a good viewpoint. I still think it. 45 days. Yeah. It's like pressure to. It's like external pressure from society. Essentially, that's what.
Yeah.
That's what it means. Do I feel more pressure after watching this to do the same, or is it unchanged? I mean, I don't really feel more pressure after watching this because I'm not going to be turned into an animal. I'm just kidding. That's taking it literally, but I personally don't feel more pressure after watching this. Actually, after watching this, in terms of relationships, I feel like this. It feels like it's not like necessarily like a happy movie per se. It's not like you feel good about it, but I think there's some there's some messages you can get from this that like could be better for your future relationships or your current ones. Like for instance, like what your relationship is built on, like whether or not it's built on lies or whatever. Like whether or not like you don't necessarily want to force it, and also like
how far are you willing to go?
How far you're willing to go to be with someone, or to like stay with someone.
To find love.
To find love. Those are some important tropes I think regarding relationships, and I think that kind of like this film. What I like about this film that it does is that it leaves it up to interpretation. So if you do feel pessimistic about the relationships in general and how modern society kind of acts on it, or like what it's like in modern society, then you can interpret it that way, or you can kind of find the little subtle messages of like, oh, this is like what not to do, for you, maybe if you want to find something more authentic, or just better quality in the future. JPEG Slayer asks, but what if you end up with Psychopath Woman instead of Butter Biscuit Woman?
Oh.
Well, okay. At that point, it's like whether or not you'd rather be alone, like a loner, or in a bad relationship, even though like society might think you're in a better state.
Yeah.
Man, JPEG Slayer, why didn't you just join this stream? We're asking so many questions.
I think.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if there's much pressure. I'm already, thinking like, oh, will I be able to find somebody? But I don't know. After watching this movie, I would say, oh, the pressure's on. But yeah, it's just like, there's definitely that, desire to be with somebody or find somebody. But I don't know. I think as a guy, it's the time is not as closer as if I were a woman, right? I think a woman, might try to find a relationship, once they get a little bit older, they get a little more desperate. For a guy, it's like, oh, I can. Like, I think it's all shown in the movie already. There's someone who can go for someone who's younger, or just be able to be more self-sufficient in the end. But yeah, I wouldn't say there's any difference in my viewpoint after watching. But yeah, I guess that definitely made me reflect back and think about it. Just like, well, what happened, and how what extent would I go to? But I would say not very far.
Yeah. I wouldn't say it's like an overwhelming concern of mine. Like I don't care too much, but now it's like more in the back burner. Like,
Yeah. So another thing. How did you guys interpret the ending of the film? Do you think that David blinded himself?
Ooh. Well, it's definitely left ambiguous, for a reason, right? So we upped into interpretation to each viewer. I would say the ending definitely left. I wouldn't say like a bitter taste, but definitely like left like a unfulfilling. And that's the point, right? But I think I was slightly down with the whole, the whole kind of like long shot, just waiting and seeing what was actually done, and did he do it? I think it was. I kind of agree with you, Patrick. That it kind of implied that he might not have done. I mean, he would put the napkin in his mouth, and we see it. He's struggling, but I feel like at the same time, David just wasn't committed. We already saw there's breaks, right? He didn't see her for a long time. Right before that, he didn't find the rabbit, and he was trying to find the commonalities when they weren't there. And there's one point where he can find commonality. They go to the restaurant. They're there. They left together. But the very at that very end, that very moment, when we can see whether or not he's really committed to her, he struggles, right? He doesn't know if he wants to do it. I don't know if he did. I mean, there's the long pause and long scene. We don't see him come back, and I'm thinking, how does he come back if he's blinded, right? Like, I don't know, but like at the same time, I don't know if he did it. I feel like it was that is too much, like self harm and whatnot. We see like David's always about his own self interest, right? Finding someone he wants. That he kind of got selfish at the end. We kind of see his true colors. Yeah, exactly. Short-sighted. So I don't know. Maybe he's short-sighted. He did it and doesn't really care about it. But I don't know. I feel like at this point he probably got perspective and just didn't feel like it was meant to be at that point. So
my interpretation of it, it's definitely supposed to, but so one thing I noticed is all the characters they're stilted away and they don't actually seem to change, right? They don't seem to recognize the absurdity of the situation they're in, and they all just follow along blindly and go to one or of two extremes. Mm-hmm. And I felt like none of them actually learn from any mistakes or learn lessons from anything that happened incorrectly. So I would imagine if the scene continued for a few more minutes, he doesn't actually blind himself, but he pretends to be blind.
Oh,
he just closes his eyes.
Yeah.
Maybe peeks a little bit and then closes his eyes again.
Yeah, that's actually I didn't even think about that as an ending, but I also agree. I don't think he blinded himself. I think there's a little. I mean, in addition to that lingering scene at the very end where she's alone, she's literally just. I mean, it's supposed to. I guess it's supposed to symbolize that she's it's just her that's blind. It's not them. It's just her. So David isn't in she's by herself in this state of blindness. But also there was a little subtle thing that happened before when they're playing this touching game, and she was like kiwi, and it was a tennis ball. He lied. He said it was a kiwi, and when she said it wasn't a kiwi, and he lied to make her, I guess, feel better, or whatever, maybe, or but that was a subtle lie. That was a straight up lie, and that's a little subtle in terms of the
I think she knew, right? Because the game was called Guess, Touch, Guess, Be Correct, or something like that.
Yeah,
she knew that.
I actually went back at that point. I was like, wait, what did she?
Wait, you see, she knew it wasn't a kiwi?
Well, she knew that he was lying because the name of the game was touch, guess, feel, and be correct. So whatever he was telling her, he would always say yes, it's correct, and she I think she caught on. I was like, oh yeah.
Then what's the point of her playing the game? Anyway,
just to make her interaction, make her feel good.
But the fact that it's still built on these small, it's a lie, right?
Right.
He's lying, right? So in the end, whether or not he said he's going to do it, like why like that could very much be a lie too, right? And that's why I sort of think that that's like a subtle lead up to like him not doing it. Also, I mean, the final shot also kind of like kind of insinuates it as well. But yeah, I personally don't think he did it, and I think that like he will. I what Peter said, he's gonna live a lie with her for as long as it lasts or whatever. So yeah, interesting how it kind of comes. This aspect of like trying to get into a relationship kind of comes full circle, and you're kind of left and as an ambiguous whether or not this relationship is going to last, or if David's going to like find someone else, because now she can't find someone else, she's blind. So in terms of like, I don't know, I was making a little connection,
right.
Literal, figurative connection. So at first when I the ending to me was very like the beginning and ending of these films were very striking, because
yes.
they were both very different from one another. Well, one of, for instance, the beginning was like straight up like this shooting a freaking donkey. It was like, okay, what's going on? And then the ending itself, just it felt like it ended very abruptly, and it was just like, it was very different from the beginning, because the first one was just full of like bam, it's like in your face, whereas the ending was very much just like, it was almost like very calm, and like there was not much happening, but the implications were very heavy.
It was pretty suspenseful too, right? Like just you don't know what was happening, whether or not he would do it, and then you kind of wonder at the end, and then it just cuts out, and you're just like, oh.
It's one of those ambiguous endings. Yeah. And at first I thought, I was like, wait, that's it? and so I felt very conflicted about it, but the more I think about it, the more I just talk about it, I think it's actually a very good ending. I do enjoy the ending a lot, because I do enjoy this, like, I like ambiguous, I like films that are up to interpretation, and a lot of times like the ambiguous endings lead to that sort of interpretation, like the multiple interpretations. So yeah, I can appreciate it more now. I think in the beginning I was kind of like taken aback, but the more I talk about it, the more I think about it, the more I like it. But yeah, I mean, I think, is there I think we're probably nearing the end of our discussion, since we were talking about the ending. But overall, do you guys have anything that you wanted to else in particular that you want to talk about this film? What are your overall thoughts on it, and then also like how would you rate it if you are comfortable rating it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know if there's much. I think we covered a lot of topics already. I think for this movie, there's probably room for improvement. I just think I already kind of said my gripes about how the world was shown outside of it. I think being able to either omit that part or show a different aspect of it might have been better. But it was definitely I think a good story told. It's just very unsettling watching it. Just the messaging was maybe usually coming away from a movie I like positive messaging and whatnot, but here there's definitely no positive message being sent, right? It's more like I would say like a downer, kind of just like, be careful, relationships got to have a balance, and like it just there's no kind of giving caution to on an aspect that we should all usually society finds positive, like love and whatnot, finding true love and whatnot. There's like no true love, or what would people do. You kind of see the main character who was sympathetic in the beginning, and then we kind of see like, oh, is he actually going to be with her, or is it kind of a superficial relationship? So yeah, I don't know. There's not much to discuss, but I think there's definitely things that even to improve. I thought the execution was well. The acting is supposed to be the way. I think the way it's supposed to be is still did. So
yeah,
it was a very, very strange movie. Giving it a rating, I think it's going to be tough, just because I
yeah. Oh, okay. Thought you muted
Yeah,
yourself. Sorry.
Do you want to think about it? And then like,
What's that, Peter? What did you say?
like, did you want to like wait for the rest of us to talk about it, and we can all give our ratings at the end and be like, talk about why, what the numbers mean, basically.
I guess another thing I'm curious about, sorry to interrupt, is that another thing I wanted to ask in terms of your overall impressions is like, do you feel more how are your feelings toward relationships in general affected by watching this film?
I don't think my view on relationships has really changed. I mean, it definitely gave me things to think about, right? And this movie definitely makes you think, right? But I don't think my view on relationships would change. And I usually with movies like these, I don't think I usually have a profound belief that's swapped or kind of converted. I think it just gets me. Yeah, no revelation, no whatnot. I think it just gets me something to think about, in a different light. But I don't know if my whole way that I think of things, would be fundamentally altered. Just food for thought, right? That's why it just sounds something that for my brain to chew on. Like, okay, yeah, that's interesting, and message. But I also think the message was not really. I didn't fully open up to it. I was just like, I don't like this negative viewpoint of the whole society and relationships in general. So I don't think anything changed. It's like, I think things can be positive and where people go. But yeah, I see there's kind of definitely dystopian, or not dystopian, kind of like negative aspects, and you have to don't be who you are, but don't try to change and whatnot, and how far people will go for it. So I don't know if I would say I'm fundamentally altered by this watching this movie.
Pierre?
Yeah, I share a lot of the same thoughts as Austin. Let's see. I did want to bring up two things. One, I felt like while it was a good movie, and I'm no expert at this stuff, I did feel like there were also a lot of for example, we spent a lot of time talking about the first half of the movie, but not as much time talking about the second half. And I did feel like when I was watching it, first half is great. Second half, it's it felt like it stayed over long, and it felt just like it just could have made the same point within a short time frame. Part of the thing, I also started feeling more just interested in, just because it's so hard to create a connection with these characters, right? And I'm really one for the characters, and that's intentional as part of the thing, but it just felt bad. And kind of related to that, it's the casting choice. The casting choice continually took me out of it, because one, Colin Farrell, I've seen True Detective, and he kind of acts similarly. And there was there's some scenes where it seemed very similar to that, which kind of confused me. But it's also hard to take John C. Reilly seriously. And I don't know. It also felt like these people had talents, but these talents were not suited for the movie.
Oh, I see. Okay.
What else? Oh, I also did want to mention one thing was interesting, which is when I got to the ending, I actually went back to the beginning and watched the scene where he talks to his wife, because it highlights one thing where the thing he asks his wife right before he leaves is so does he wear glasses or contacts? And she says glasses. So his wife was also short-sighted, and she found a different person who was short-sighted. They they fell in love with each other, but that implies that there's actually some reason that they fell out of love and these two fell in love, right? That wasn't this defining characteristic, but for whatever reason they couldn't figure it out. They were unaware of this. They were just oh, it's just due to the traits, and that was the only question he asked before he left.
Yeah, very superficial, right?
Right, but it's just interesting that they couldn't figure out what was the reason behind the love, and I thought it was and he was suspicious that it was just the glasses thing. And you see the same thing when he corners that dude who brought short-sighted women, the rabbit. She's are you wearing contacts?
Contacts. He goes. I was like, wow, Dan, calm down, dude. Oh.
Yeah. So it kind of implies that
he's short-sighted.
They're needing to it, but they couldn't figure it out. All the characters are just somehow unaware of it. Yeah. Overall, I feel like it was a good movie. It wasn't 100% enjoyable all throughout, but I feel like it was good. It had a good lesson. I feel like I my perspective of relationships has changed a little bit in the positive direction, but like, yeah, it wasn't like some huge revelatory.
Yeah. Yeah. How would you rate it? If you
Until rating until we're all done with this, and then like talk about it. Because I feel like
oh my goodness.
I rate it differently based off of what criteria we're using, you know?
Right. Okay. Yeah, I'll talk about it. How I felt. I like I said, I really like the ending. I like how it hooked you. I like the world building. That was fantastic. I think that was very well done. It was subtle and it was authentic. Like it was. Yeah, it kind of like it was very natural. How the world building unfolded to the audience. So the as the story progressed, the first half was very. It was just interesting to see how the hotel worked and everything. Second half. The second half was. I mean, I think it was all right because I just like I really like the concept of like how he found someone, and almost in like in a setting that wasn't meant to be where you were meant to find someone. Whereas in the first half, it's like the setting was built for you to like find someone, right? But that didn't happen. And, well, it did happen, but it wasn't authentic. Whereas in the second one, it felt authentic, more authentic how he found someone, but like the setting wasn't permissible for their relationship. So like I really like that like contrast. I thought that was really cool. And then, so I think the flow of the story was like very neat because you got to see the two different perspectives, very different perspectives on this whole like finding a relationship part. In terms of the characters themselves, yeah, like because it was all monotone, like I can't really say much about it. It was just there, but I think that was done on purpose. So I don't really give a flack.
Can't really knock it. I agree. I wanted the emotion to be shown, but at the same time, really, I thought he would turn his. I thought more emotion would be shown later in the movie once he was the loners. But then I felt like, oh, loners also have a dystopian society. So then the whole movie, he was kind of everyone's were pretty fine. And it's like I wanted more, but at the same time, like, I understood why they had that. Like it made sense. Right? That was a directional choice. And
yeah,
but it did affect the enjoyment. But I don't know.
To me, I guess to me it didn't, like, it was noteworthy, but I don't think it negatively affected, negatively affected my viewing enjoyment because I was still fixated on, like, the message that this film was trying to portray rather than the characters themselves. Yeah, because I wasn't really invested in any of the characters personally. I was more invested in, like, the plot and the theme behind it.
And the dog.
The dog? You mean the brother?
Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh. Yeah, that was unsettling, but I thought that was done really well.
I think
it was done well.
It definitely showed like this is a cruel woman, right? And we see what her next. This was definitely I think that was definitely kind of in hindsight obvious that she would do that. Like she was cruel and inhumane, and we saw her like beating up people up, and that's when we saw her emotions, she's beating someone up, right? That's when she was smiling and whatnot, like beating up the loner in the woods.
Yeah.
So
she was testing him, right?
Yeah,
it was all a test, and he failed in the end.
I like how the first time you see her tested, it's like completely fake. She's faking choking, and the second time you think it's fake, and then pans down to her blood-covered shins, and you're like, oh god.
Oh yeah. And then he goes to the bathroom, and it's like, yeah, this is quite unsettling. But yeah, I think the ending of the film was also very good in terms of the ambiguous ending. I really like that.
Yeah.
But in terms of so going back to like very beginning when I mentioned what I like about dramas and whether or not the thematic significance of it, because like dramas are meant to be taken more seriously, right, than other like comedies, for instance, right? Comedies aren't really, I feel, are kind of just like enjoyment based, but like dramas for me, a good drama is something I can like take away from it. Like I learned something from it that I can like maybe positively affect my life in the future. But I think this film was more so like showing us, in a sense, like not what not to do, more so than like what to do, which is it's fine, but it's conflicting because I feel like there's going to be a lot of people who interpret this film as like, oh man, relationships suck. Like there's going to be like, oh yeah, like very pessimistic toward relationship in general.
Well, I think that's only if you that is like the first half of the movie, right? It just kind of comments on relationship, but the second half also just comments on being single, right? Being alone and whatnot.
Yeah, and that also that also sucks too, right? Like they also show the case like, oh yeah, the person was punished because he flirted or whatever, so they burned his lips.
Cut his lips and had him the red kiss.
Right. So in a sense, it's like I guess if you interpret it literally, like you get the sense of like, oh, what's the point in all this, and which might make you like almost apathetic toward the whole relationship in general. Like you're like, both sides suck. Like there's no point. I don't know.
There's no regulations to relationships and being single, right? Like let love flow, I think, and that's kind of like the whole big thing, right? And you couldn't really define it. I think it's not that it's maybe it is a commentary on like homosexuality and bisexuality, right? Because in the beginning it was just like you have to be one or the other. Bisexuality is kind of written out. The blonde girl, right? She had I think a kind of affinity for the red, and that's kind of like, oh, everything is kind of regulated there, right? And if we kind of release that regulation, it's just like, oh, let love be. You love who you are. Maybe you don't love at all. Maybe you're single. Maybe you're asexual, right?
Love yourself.
Love yourself. Exactly. So I don't think there's the common secretary is just like what do we do with like if there's restrictions on love, that we shouldn't have restrictions on love, who we love and whatnot. But yeah.
Hopping on to another of Patrick's points, at some point I was like thinking during the movie, maybe the being the animal part isn't that bad, because it seems like the animals in the background were like just living their life, doing a lot of things that humans like to do. In fact, they bring up at one point, like your last day, you should do something that you like to do that you can't do as an animal, because a lot of people would otherwise choose something that they could do.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true.
But yeah, I think that's part of like maybe this whole like messaging of like apathy or even like pessimism comes from this dystopian trope.
Yeah.
And like I do like the world building of dystopian films. I think it's really cool when it's well done. But I'm also conflicted because I sometimes I just don't necessarily. I just hope that people don't interpret this film as something like, oh yeah, like relationships all suck, like in this case, or like it's all like I don't care about any of this anymore. Like they become like disenchanted. Is that the right word? Yeah.
Disenfranchised.
Yeah, disenfranchised by the whole like concept, and I think there's important things to learn about it. But I think I hope there's like more positives that people get out of it than negatives. That's like my reason, because like this is like a lot of people have watched this film, right? So there's a lot of like interpretations of it, and I at least from like my perspective on like storytelling is that like even if the story is like a negative story, like there's still positives that you can bring out of it. Like you still learn something from it. Like for instance, like what not to do instead of what to do, right? Instead of like, oh, life sucks, whatever. And this film kind of like, to me, was a little bit on like the verge of like, oh, it could be interpreted as life sucks, whatever, versus like you learn these little subtle things of like, oh, relationships can't like be forced, or you can't like base it on a lie, or like how far is too far when you're trying to find love. So yeah, this is just my interpretation of like taking it more seriously, because I think as a drama film it is meant to be taken more seriously.
Yeah.
And as far as our rating goes, like I mean acting is like I don't know if I can really rate the acting because I feel like that's like unfair to the review itself because I think it was meant to just be monotone. I think the plot was well done. I think the world building was well done. I think I do like the beginning and I do like the end. And I can't really like.
Anything that you would improve?
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything that I would improve, and like I can't really think of anything. Like I was thinking maybe they would show them like their relationship at the end. David's and the narrator's relationship at the end could have been built more happily, or like built on something more than just short-sightedness to represent that they have like actually like matured together or grown together, and there's more than just this like one attribute that they have in common. But I feel like that would also cheapen the message of the movie in a sense because it's like, oh, this movie was like kind of like dystopian, it was depressing, and all of a sudden like it just ends happily. Like I don't think I would have liked that ending either. So like yeah, I don't think there's like not much I would change about this film. It's just so like in terms of like from a cinematics perspective, I think I would rate it pretty high. Like I would probably give it like 7.5 or 8 at least, around that score because like I think from storytelling, from how it was framed, how it was shot, and like the execution, what I think was well done overall. The only gripe I have with it is more of like the messaging and the thematic significance of it.
Yeah.
Because I personally took positives away from it, but I just don't know whether or not like there are parts where I'm like, like what's the point? Like I'm not sure where like what this is trying to say. But I had to think about it more in order to take like positives away from it. Because at first, my first reaction was like, oh, like at the end I was like, huh, what was the point of like this 2-hour adventure? What did I get from this? And like some people might argue that you don't necessarily have to get anything from a movie, right? You don't need like.
Yeah, that's what I think. I don't think you need to, right? I think
like,
the drama, because it's a good story, you don't have to actually necessarily to take away a message. But usually there is a message that they try to portray, and you can either learn from it or not. But I think it's just something that you just understand from the movie. I think.
Right. I do like how it was ambiguous. I do like the ambiguity, like how it was subject to multiple like you can interpret it in multiple ways. So that's cool. I do like that sort of freedom of thought sort of concept. But yeah, my knee-jerk reaction to it was like, huh, what did I get from that? what was this experience and what did I get from this? But I guess the more that I discuss it, the more I think about it and talk about it, there's a lot of depth to it, and I do appreciate like it more. So
final rating.
Probably like an 8. I give it an 8.
8.
Yeah, you can't do 7.5. You have to do 7 or 8.
Wait, why not? It's our rating. You're not the one defining the system.
No, the lobster part, where like even like the shoe sizes, they're like, oh, you can't choose.
Oh, right. right. Oh, you're okay. You're right. It has to be. We don't have 7.5s here. 7 or 8. Yeah, I'd give it an 8. I think I would recommend. What is the rating system? That's what J Fixler asked. 8 to me is like, so anything above a 7 or above is a movie I would recommend, in general. And I think a 7 is like basically like, it was like a good message behind it, but it wasn't necessarily like. For the genre of the movie, it wasn't necessarily like wasn't as like thought provoking in terms of like a drama. So like I think for me, because this movie was a lot more thought provoking, but it had a lot of like personally, like I was personally conflicted to it. I wouldn't give it higher than an 8, but I wouldn't give it as low as 7, so I'd give it an 8. Or sorry, as high as a 9, I wouldn't give it as low as a 7, so I would give it an 8. I hope that answers your question. I'm not. Yeah.
I think for me, I mean, you touched you went on, Patrick. I think you touched a lot of good points. You know, beginning was very strong. I think set a good opening, right? Set a very good tone for the movie. You know, it's very mysterious, and you have an animal that gets shot, right? It definitely gives you tells you what to expect. There's animals, there's drama, kind of suspense as well. The beginning was well done, and just the way how they opened it, and ending as well. I think you touched on that a lot already, and I think the story went well. I wouldn't have anything much to improve upon it. I think the way that the movie flowed, the storytelling wise, cinematic wise, it's done really well. Cinematically, I like some of the shots that they pulled together to kind of convey all this information.
Yep.
And I like the characters. Each one, even though the acting was flat, I think that's done on purpose. You can't really knock that down, right? Because this is the kind of a world that's dystopian, and I think this is its own genre. It being dystopian, we kind of want to see, how this is dysfunction. I think yes, my problem with how the world was being built and portrayed. Could have been shown differently, and then I think I would have appreciated a more positive message at the end, or more positive aspects coming out of it, not just all the negatives, but again, this being part of the dystopian genre, they kind of wanted to have that spin. But I just remember watching it, it never really got me going. Like nearly got me excited, just got me thinking and saying, oh yeah, trying to understand and trying to piece out what the meaning was. So I didn't really feel like I was lashed on to anything that was going on. I didn't really I guess kind of be related, relate myself to or sympathize with what's going on, or I could understand it, right? So I thought the messaging was there. The messaging was smart and balanced, and they try to present two sides of the coin. So I think it was good in that the way that it portrayed the story, the way it portrayed its themes, and the way that was portrayed to the audience. But again, just the way I felt watching this movie, just there's a lot of things going on with themes and whatnot, which I thought could have been maybe improved. I really thought the acting could have maybe been I guess the acting was it's just because they wanted to have you be unsettled, but it really just affected my how I felt, I think.
Yeah. At the same time, sorry to interrupt. Because I know Peter wants to probably say something about it, but I just want to say some more about your point. The theme of the movie is that because if it was more happy, or it was a happier theme, then that would sort of it'd be a different type of film.
Exactly, it would take away. It's not no longer part of dystopian genre, right? It would have been something else, and it'd been different. And that's true, and that's why I think it I probably will give it a higher rating as well, just because how would I improve this movie? I don't know if I could. In terms of what kind of story they're trying to tell, I thought they told a story, they told it well, and they had made very specific choices that we caught on, that they're trying to make this world, and there's not much I could say that I would have flayed this movie.
Right.
But again, there's just things that I think could have been built better in terms of maybe character choices and just the way the world was built and how they explained it. But I thought again, this was I think it's a smartly done movie. So I think I would actually probably match your rating, Patrick. My rating would be also an 8 for this movie.
All right. I think both of you have covered basically everything I would have wanted to say, which is good. No, that's good. But so I think my rating, I'll rate it 2 different ways. I think my ultimate rating would be 7 out of 10, with the caveat that my personal enjoyment rating was 5 out of 10, and it felt kind of like a really good, in my opinion, it felt like a really good those aside readings you had to do in high school or whatever. It felt like a really good one of those where it's there's a really good lesson to be here, and it's well done and everything, but my personal enjoyment of it is not that high. I can recognize this is good. I can recognize that it's more enjoyable than other stuff in this genre that I would find myself watching. But just so much of the of a movie, or I guess media in general, because I don't actually watch too many movies. So much of the enjoyment of that stuff is like just the characters and the relationships and the environment, the world building for me. And this didn't deliver on those, but like, yeah, it was like you said, it was intentional. It's meant to portray a certain type of story. It's just like this. But yeah, so anyways, my ultimate takeaway is like, it's a good, I would recommend this to people to watch. It's
definitely
a
recommend
good
it.
movie
Yeah.
overall. 7 thumbs up out of 10 thumbs.
7 thumbs out of 10 thumbs. But we only have 6 thumbs. How does that work? Between the 3 of us. Sorry. Yeah, I think overall that the internal conflict I have with this movie is maybe not toward the movie itself, but toward dystopian genres in general. Because I haven't really watched too many dystopian dramas, especially those that have, or dystopian movies in general, especially those that have like ambiguous thematic meanings or ambiguous themes surrounding them. So like, dystopians aren't meant to be a feel-good movie, but it's also like, hopefully in the end they're meant to, you can have some sort of this open discussion or open interpretation to them. So to me maybe as it's like separating what I personally feel about it versus like what the film is meant to present to an audience, like what the film was meant to portray. I think is like something that I had to like, was like an internal conflict almost for me, is to separate.
I had to divorce from it. Yeah.
Yeah, I had to like separate that because like it wasn't a feel good movie. Like I agree, like, and with Peter, like I didn't personally enjoy all of it. But I think for its genre and for what it was meant to do, as something like from the directors, what the director wanted to do with the film, I think it did a good job.
Yeah.
So yeah, perhaps it's like, yeah, I should watch more dystopian films to sort of like better compare with how this film was executed. But I think the execution of the film was pretty good overall, which is why I gave it an 8. Cool. Yeah, I mean that's all I've got to say. Do you guys have any last comments? Otherwise, the stream is we're going to end the stream. Because we're at the end of our discussion.
I recommend the movie. That's all. Definitely.
All of us give a thumbs up. We recommend this movie. If you watch this stream, or this video, The Lobster 2015, released in 2015, is a very nice film on dystopian film on the I guess almost like a modern day interpretation of like relationships in general. So it is, yeah, we all recommend it. Yeah. Cool. So once again, thank you, Peter, for joining us for the stream. It was very nice to have you on the with us, and have you talk about the film with us. Thanks for your participation. Thanks for being here for the entire time. Austin and I, we do this every week, Sunday at 11 a.m. Pacific time. We watch a film, we discuss it. So if you want us to, if you recommend any film, you can always leave it in chat during our stream, and then we can we might watch it. And then we also have a YouTube channel. I put a link of it in the chat earlier. It's basically an edit of like the important parts of the stream, consolidated in a more viewable experience, taking out all like the different noise and whatnot. So yeah, you can go to that channel and see our previous discussions for the films that we watch. But yeah, I think that's about it. If you guys, Austin, Peter, if you don't have anything to say, then that's it. I hope whenever you see this, you have a good day. And yeah,